There is always a character that stands out among the pack. This character can just be named and the people around them will be struck with a jolt of fear or admiration. Fame, tangible strength, mythicism, or fear. All characters feel this pressure. There has to be something compelling about the character to draw not only the viewer, but also the characters around them. The aura this character emits is devastating and their presence can be generational. I like to call this concept/video simply the strongest, or the strongest in the verse. This should be obvious, but I'm only talking about within the bounds of that particular universe. This is not about power scaling. I'm using anime/manga for this discussion, but it can also be applied to movies and real life scenarios as well. For example, a current world leader or even one from the past. They can have this type of impact of fear or mythical admiration. Which is better? How do you get to this status? Can you lose this position? Let's talk about it. Welcome to another episode of Analyzing These Animes. I am your host, Liquid Zero. Please go ahead and hit that like button and sub up if you're new. Anyway, let's get started. No, I'm clearly not going to go over every anime/manga series because that will take forever, but I'm mostly going to cover ones that I know pretty well and ones that a general audience would understand and have seen before. For example, most people have seen Bleach, Naruto, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and like DBZ. I'm a big mecha fan, for example, and even for more obscure series. Don't worry, I'm not going to hit you with that quick disclaimer. There will be spoilers, obviously, in this video. I think the easiest route to go first is to describe exactly what the strongest means. By definition, the strongest means having, showing, or able to exert great bodily or muscular power, physically, vigorously, or robust. Obviously, we're going to go further than this, but it's a pretty good foundation for the basics. One of the first characters that come in mind to me for this is actually All Might from My Hero Academia. When All Might is introduced, he is basically the Superman of the universe. He is loved, admired, and revered for his strong sense of justice and unyielding resolve. Beyond all that, the reason is really because he is the strongest hero. Proving this by defeating All For One and sending him to jail, which that battle they had is pretty much for who is going to lead and who will be the strongest in their era. You can see and feel All Might's presence on almost every corner of the world of My Hero Academia. You see statues, billboards, TV ads, and people in the streets. Well, that's all they talk about. All Might is also immortalized permanently as a symbol or beacon of hope even after he has given one for all to Deku. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the strongest isn't just a title of how much strength you have, but the overarching impact that character to that particular story. Basically, you cannot avoid the character, and that character is baked into the very being of the story. It causes something other than admiration and love too, haha, and that is pure hatred and disdain towards a character. Switching gears to the other side, a character I can think of the most that showcases this is actually Aizen from Bleach. When Aizen turns on the Soul Society by betraying the trust of the quote-unquote closest subordinates and colleagues, he ignites a rage and disdain for him that is unmatched by most villains, at least in real time. For example, even though Madara is hated, it's only shown from a prequel perspective for the reasons why. Obito adopts the name for the sake of the clan betraying him, and then you get the story behind the cycle of hatred in the Uchiha clan. However, with a character like Aizen, and mind you, in real time, he annihilates his so-called bonds and steals away 3 captains class Shinigami from Nagote 13. What I'm saying is you can feel the aura of Aizen build in real time. There's much more of a connection to a villain like Aizen than one that's already been established or that is being told from a flashback perspective. It's even stated that Aizen does not use Kyokusui Getsu to control the Espada. The reason they follow him is because he's just that much stronger than everyone else in Hyokamundo. The power dynamic builds resentment and Bleach on every side and even within the ranks of his own subordinates. For example, Grimmjow's goal is to usurp and become the strongest himself. Baragon wants his revenge from the embarrassment he suffered as a result of Aizen once he crossed over from Soul Society to Hyokamundo. In Turn Back the Pendulum, we get a peek into why the Vizard faction hates him so much. Aizen used them as fodder for his experiments and then called them failures after the holification experiment. I mean, when you think about it, Aizen is so strong, he needed to build someone up with the potential of 3 races to challenge him so that he can continue to evolve, so that he can eventually kill the god of the Bleach universe, aka the Soul King who created the 3 realms, which is above what is achievable by a person bound to the rules of the realm of logic of the realm, if that makes sense. Basically, it's like saying the most powerful man on earth is now going to go and challenge God, or you can say he has found a way to defeat God. He just needs to meet a few requirements to accomplish this. Aizen's best characteristic is probably not even his strength, but the mind games he plays with his opponents. The way he tricks his subordinate Hinamori with his fake death just to emerge again and then stab her might be one of the coldest angles and plot twists we've ever seen in anime. He goes on from a meek and humble captain that is the result of a murder to actually being a psychopath that had a long-standing plan to end the current world. Aizen is a very complex character, and especially because of his decision to create the Hyogoku, which essentially is a wishing device. It manifests what his soul really wants, and in that end, that was just to be a soul reaper and seemingly not go down the path of evolution of breaking the hollow and Shinigami barrier. Also, Aizen never actually becomes a hollow, so his real desire was just something that could defeat the Soul King. His best guess was something stronger than the hollow and the Shinigami. He saw how strong Ichigo completely fusing with his sword for Mugetsu, so logically the Hyogoku mimicked it and fused himself with his sword, which is what Chair-sama Aizen at the end of Bleach actually is. So, what's preferred? To be respected like All Might or feared/disdained like Aizen? That's for you to decide, but I do think there's something special about a villain who can hold the attention of the audience by not being generic or boring and remain super interesting throughout the story. Can the strongest be more than one character? By definition, no, but that is not necessarily acknowledged by characters in the story. So when we are talking about the strongest, what we're really talking about is not objectively the strongest, but more so who the people acknowledge is the strongest. For example, Gojo is the current strongest in the JJK anime, but we as a viewer see Sukuna in the entire first and second season and acknowledge he is at least at Gojo's level, and in the past he's confirmed to be the strongest. So really what you're trying to do is clash the ideals of the past versus the present and see which one is the strongest. But the people don't know Sukuna, at least not at the beginning, so they find it out later obviously through Yuji, but yeah. So I'm not caught up on the JJK manga, FYI, but I do know some major stuff happens. But I'm mainly only going to be talking about season 1, the movie, and season 2. So when Gojo is captured and restrained in prison in season 2, or the Shibuya arc, the cast is lost and doesn't know what to do. Their safety net, or the one who will always come through for them, is no longer, and the entire area is turned into utter chaos. This gives a great look into just how important the perceived strongest person or character being in trouble affects the characters around them on both sides. Now, I think one of the most undisputed strongest characters in the anime is actually Yorichi from Demon Slayer. Yorichi is absolute in a sense that he is considered the strongest from the very start of the manga to the very end. He is the originator of every style, or better stated, each style uses that template as at its base form and then expands and branches out. Yorichi is honestly transcendent because everything this man has done caused an everlasting effect on the world of Demon Slayer. His presence is felt in every single Demon Slayer in the modern era. His sun breathing is the base template for every style, or a style is derived from a style which derives from sun breathing. Yorichi bodied Muzan so hard he got PTSD. The mental damage he received was catastrophic. Muzan also is still burning from the damage Yorichi caused all those years ago, and funnily enough is the reason why the current era Demon Slayers are actually able to defeat him. Also, Muzan is scarred mentally so much that any demon that was created post-incident can feel the fear he experienced as a result of being decimated by Yorichi. It's insane when you think about it. Yorichi stained Muzan so hard that his entire lineage of demons feels the fear. Despite all of this, if you took Yorichi's own word for it, he sees himself as a failure. A failure because despite how close he came and how much he damaged the king of the demons, he still lost everything. What good is all that strength if you can't accomplish your goal? For as strong as he is for the Demon Slayer verse, Yorichi has zero ego. Something I will point out is that ultimately he does not fail because of the fact that he passed down his teachings to the next generation and is the reason why ultimately Muzan and his demons are finally defeated. One of my favorite parts that humanized Yorichi is his conversation that he had with Tanjiro's ancestor, where he pours his heart out about everything. One of the more well done clashes of the strongest, as well as the ideals clash of the strongest, is actually Hashirama Senju versus Uchiha Madara. This battle is the result of a blood feud between the Senju and the Uchiha that is passed down from brothers Indra and Ashura. The feud began because the sage chose Ashura aka Hashirama to be his successor instead of Indra aka Madara. Long story short, these two clash of ideals was like democracy versus a dictatorship. For Madara, he thought that force would be enough to hold all other villages at bay and to keep the tail beast for himself, while Hashirama wanted a shared approach to deter war within the great nations. These ideals clashed and they fought, with Hashirama becoming the victor, but instead of killing Madara, Hashirama extended his hand and wanted him to be a Hokage as well, which was short-lived, and they fought at the Valley of the End, where they quote-unquote reshaped the maps. Oh, that's a Madara quote if you don't know. When he was talking to the 5 Kage. Anyway, these two were so far ahead of the rest of the ninja world that there was no comparison from that time till the present day on who could rival them. By present day, I mean start of the war arc. Naruto and Sasuke could only catch up after unnaturally gaining strength as a gift from the Sage of Six Paths. These two were the strongest at the time and pretty close in power, with Hashirama slightly edging Madara. Which approach is correct? Hashirama ended up being wrong technically. Giving out the bijus as a weapon deterrent only led to more war. Some gave the biju directly to their leaders, some subjugated their own children and relatives to live the life of Jinchuriki with one goal in mind: to dominate the other nations that aren't allied with them. However, one of the better things Hashirama did was keep the strongest of the tail beasts for his village, and obviously one he knows the best because he fought it when Madara was controlling it. Madara's option was the opposite of Hashirama. Konoha would remain supreme and all would be under their rule. This could have possibly been the right choice and pretty much the same as the Infinite Tsukuyomi. You will enjoy the life that I've given you and you will have no say in the matter is kind of what I'm getting at what Madara's plan would be. War would be able to end in this scenario and the thing that the Senju and Uchiha wanted would finally be achieved. However, it would be under one rule, so if you as a nation disagree with this ideology, then you would be crushed under the weight of the Senju and Uchiha's might. Madara's way may have worked better for the warring time period, but eventually such a ham-fisted way of control wouldn't work and there would be a possible rebellion or coups. Also, once Hashirama and Madara die, would the two clans be able to hold the other villages at bay? To me, the Madara way is probably the most efficient, at least during the warring time period. His philosophy is basically the strongest shall rule with no input from the outside forces, which is why I called it a dictatorship. Like, hey, you guys are only going to do what Madara tells you to do and you're going to shut up about it or he's going to make an example out of you. But eventually his way would have failed as well and may have caused an intense retaliation that could cause a permanent fall of Konoha or at least severely limit their position. I personally don't think Hashirama succeeded. It ends up being the best outcome for the village, but not the ninja world itself. As Pain explained, the other villages were used and abused by the main villages in either proxy wars or as a battlefield. Hashirama being ultimately the strongest in the world, here he chose not to use oppression initially, but it still happened anyway by proxy of the system he had created. So even if you are strong and want to do what you deem correct, it can still backfire and blow up in your face. Maybe Madara would have been better in the long run if you think about it that way, at least for the villages outside of the 5 great nations. All would be oppressed instead of just a few. But would that have actually been real peace? Who knows? Or just temporary. I think one of the key elements of developing a character that is destined to be the strongest is that there always at least needs to be a threat. Even if it's a technicality like with Yorichi, yes, he is the strongest, but because Muzan is able to get away and essentially outlive him, Muzan wins. This compels the viewer and keeps them engaged. In the JJK example, there's always a shadow figure overlapping Gojo, who we as the viewer know is strong, if not stronger than him, but the world doesn't really know. Well, they kind of know, but you get what I'm saying. The overarching theme is that Gojo is the strongest. And even then, he's at least challenged by, so he damn near died versus Toji, for example. However, it is not always the case that this is done correctly. I'll go a bit out of the shonen space and head into the mecha space real quick. Kira Yamato from Gundam Seed Destiny is probably one of the more egregious characters that does this. If any of you have ever seen Gundam Seed Destiny, you know that Kira was never meant to be the main character, as Gundam Seed Destiny is a reimagination of Zeta Gundam, with Shin meant to represent Camille and Kira is supposed to be a representation of Amuro. Long story short, if you haven't seen it, and I don't suggest watching it, this character Shin is the main character for about halfway through the series. He even kills the main character Kira, then Kira comes back like Jesus resurrected and bitch slaps the main character and hijacks the show from him. Yes, I'm being 100% serious. Kira is unbeatable, and it's been a while since I watched it, but I don't think he's even remotely challenged after he gets to Strike Freedom Gundam. He watches pretty much everyone he faces while giving the most bland Gary Stu speeches as an anime character can give. The biggest crime in all of this is that if you just make a character strong for the sake of being strong, it can lead to a pretty boring experience for the viewer, and I can't imagine this type of character is fun to write either. It distracts from the overall message of the story, as well as because it starts to degrade the interest of the story if there is no struggle. But to be fair, Gundam Seed Destiny, technically Kira is the villain and we follow the original main character, so the bad guys win. Kage is another example that comes to mind from the ending of Naruto. That is not done well. She comes in, takes a beloved character in Madara's spot, and replaces him with a pretty hollow shell of a final villain. She's just strong because she's the Ten Tails, and it also spirals Naruto's original ninja lore into alien territory, but that is a topic for another video. Note, I didn't touch on One Punch Man. I've only seen the first season, but from what I remember, it was done really well. He basically the strongest, but the issue is that he can never be challenged. It takes a toll on him to the point he starts purposely suppressing himself in order to fight to seem somewhat competitive. Like, to me, if you're gonna write a character like that, you at least need to make the story compelling and give a good reason as to why, which I think One Punch Man does a really good job of. Really what I'm trying to say is that if the only trait your character has is that he or she is strong, obstacles or not, it just makes for a boring and uninspired series. And yeah, that's it. Please like the video and subscribe if you're new. This one was pretty fun to make, kind of different than the Naruto videos I've been doing recently. I may shift to other anime topics just to see how whatever YouTube wants me to do, I guess, because we're all slaves to the algorithm. But yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Liquid Zero out.